Zeal Brothers here once again. This is another video about the supply chain. As you guys know, I have extensive experience in the supply chain. And there's a business group that was warning about the vaccine mandates. And I'll just read a little bit of it. And it says, this is what their statement was. President Joe Biden's vaccine order will force employers to lay off thousands of workers, making the supply chain crisis much worse. A major business group warned the White House of this week. The National Association of Wholesale Distributors, an influential trade group that represents an industry with nearly 6 million workers, is pleading with the administration to delay a December 8th deadline for employees of federal contractors to get vaccinated. Here's a quote. If tens or hundreds of thousands of employees are terminated just 2 weeks before Christmas, the result could be nothing short of catastrophic for the newly unemployed and their families and for the U.S. economy. Here's the White House's response. Vaccination requirements work. They've increased the vaccination rates by 20 plus percentage points to over 90% in most organizations. Then they counseled that it should be a period of education and not counseling instead of termination. And so what we have is an administration that is literally endorsing re-education. And that's an autocratic method. So when you look at the supply chain, the major problem with the supply chain, no matter where you look, is that it's simply not enough workers. Any restriction to workers will be hurting the supply chain even worse. So it doesn't matter what that is, whether that be unemployment benefits that will create less workers. If you talk about higher minimum wages, that will create less workers. Now, most supply chain people are making way more than a minimum wage. But the point is that anything that would impact full employment would have a dire effect on the supply chain. Ideas like having a National Guard step in are not real ideas. And here's the reason. Because the supply chain is often jobs that are very specialized. And that's where the bottleneck is. So if you look at the problem with the ports, a lot of these problems are caused by the fact that you need people who are able to operate these cranes. The National Guard is not going to be able to come in and operate a crane. Even if they could, I doubt that the unions that operate those cranes would want somebody who is a federal worker to just come in and take their jobs. They're not going to accept that. So these are not real solutions. When you hear people say stuff like that, this is a person that you should stop taking seriously because they are not giving a real solution to a real problem. So when these vaccination orders come in, you got to understand this. It doesn't matter how many people comply. If, like the White House said, 90% of people comply, that means 10% won't. If 10% of people do not comply, that means you are cutting an already tight employing field, right? You need workers. Everybody needs workers. And now you're cutting the workers they already do have by another 10%. That will be a recipe for disaster. People need to ask themselves this. Is it better to have more people vaccinated, or is it better to have a society? That's the question you need to ask yourself. And I know that seems a little bit hyperbolic, but it is not. Because when you look at our supply chain, we're very much in trouble. This is something that is being seen across the board. So you shouldn't take these stories lightly. I look at these stories and I'm always worried because it just talks about a detachment of the people who run the government from reality. They don't understand the supply chain. And that's why I've been saying again and again, we need somebody who has run the supply chain to be president in the next 20 years, or the country will be in dire trouble.